So, hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. You can see the scene that I'm looking at today to paint. Beautiful day here in Calgary. Expected highs today of about 10 degrees. So just a gorgeous temperature for getting out here and doing another plein air. Yeah, I'm going to try and keep this about an hour, hour and a half long. Anything more than that and the light just changes too much. So yeah, happy to have you along, and I'm just going to do the main drawing right now, and then we'll do some basic block-ins for the scene. You can pretty much see exactly where I'm going to be painting here. I might take this foreground just a little shorter in here, which is kind of more my height when I'm looking at the scene here, but yeah. Getting a really basic kind of a drawing in here. I don't want this to be too confining, so keeping it really loose, that way I can move things if I want to. But I think that looks pretty good. I'm liking this log that I'm seeing down here and this little bit of shoreline to make for an interesting picture. There's some beautiful golds in this area and an interesting bank as that works down the other side there. We've got a little bit of sky. The horizon line for me is about here, but we've got a beautiful skyline above it. So because it's not quite so cold today, maybe I'll actually do this for about an hour and a half. We'll see what happens. I want to get those dark areas in first. Maybe we'll bring in these trees just a little closer so I can include them into the painting. I kind of like that. That view, looking down at them. I'll bring that one over here. Using a pretty light wash here, really kind of wet for this first underlayer. The shadow is on the left side of everything as the sun is coming from the other side. I don't really care if I include this whole tree as much as just that bottom area of interest there in the bank. I'm loving the way these grasses are quite bright along that. And that's sort of my focal point here, as much as the tree is interesting. Little pathway here that runs up just behind that. I don't want to forget that, so I'll get that in there now. There's a beautiful piece of wood hanging over that edge also. I'm gonna bring this shoreline here a little lower so I can be a little more inclusive in what's going on in that little piece of shore there. I do like that piece of wood, so we'll end up putting that in there. Keeping everything pretty loose here. I don't want to overdraw the picture because things may move around, and I'm not being a complete slave to this either. This is my inspiration, but I don't need to make anything exact. I want to get some of the really bright, look at that, those grasses in there, because that light might change. And it's sort of got this rustiness. It's just really appealing. One of the things that drew my eye to this scene was that big. I don't know, we may have to lose that little piece of log there, just because I really like how interesting this tree is at the base there. It's really gnarly, and maybe we can do both, we'll see. But I think we'll bring it down a little bit. A little more there. That way we can get all this little gnarly root system in that bigger tree. Such a gorgeous day today that I got my butt up early so I could get here and get a painting in for it. You can really feel the evening coming in early now. By about 3 o'clock, you're already feeling that cool down of the sun getting low. So I like this little bit of shoreline here. We're gonna kind of go for sort of a movie color here, a little burnt sienna, little cad red light, little ultramarine. I'm gonna get that in that shoreline there. There's a really dark, kind of muddy area up here that we'll get. Again, keeping this pretty wet. Not sure what I'm going to include in the water there, because there is a few points of interest, but it might actually take away from the painting if I try to include them. I do like the icy water that's there. It's still sort of partially frozen. Makes for interesting light, and there's a few puddles in there they're actually melted. So we'll see what happens as this light changes too. I'm going to switch to a little bit larger brush now. I'm gonna scrub in some of this. I'm gonna get a little bit of burnt sienna in with that ultramarine just to kind of calm it down a little bit. I'm really just placing where that icy water is right now. Some of these loose marks that go on initially end up staying with the painting. They're kind of, some of them just work, and there's a looseness that you get when you're first adding them into the painting, because it's what you're directly seeing in front of you, and it really adds to the end result, I find. I'm using sort of a bluey mauvey color on this back hill where the rocks are coming down towards the shoreline there. Just sort of a dirty color, really. And then there's just this very kind of sandy area on the far back of the bank there, showing through. And I'm gonna get that in there. Sort of runs all the way along there. I'm going to add a little warmth to it in this area because it's got some nice golden warmth to it. I'm not afraid to punch the color off a little bit more than what I'm seeing, just for interest. And then there's a little bit of a darker edge as it goes over the top there. A bit of a darker edge right along the lowest part of that shoreline. Really, this is right now just about kind of getting the drawing in a way with the colors and values so that I can get a good placement on everything. Now, last place that needs to get some paint on it is this foreground, and I'm kind of using a yellow ochre with a little bit of cobalt blue in there. It's a kind of a sagey, yellowy. I'm going a little darker so I can lighten up the value with some highlights later on that edge. Adding a little burnt sienna that I see in that edge closer to the bank edge there, and that'll help to be able to highlight later. Now I guess we still have some sky there. I'm going to go into a little bit of a cobalt blue. I'm going to add a tiny bit of lemon yellow to that. I think I want to use a clean brush for that. That was a little mucky, so we'll just wipe that off there. And we'll do that again with a clean brush. So again, a little bit of white, a little bit of cobalt blue, a little bit of tiny little bit of lemon yellow in there just to bring that down into a softer color near the bottom here. I want to keep this sky fairly clean, so I just want to get it in. And now I can still go in and put some sky holes later, but this will just establish some color behind those trees before I put any branches in. And go a little bit, add a little bit of ultramarine to that. Oop, that was a little rich. And take it just a little bluer as it goes up near the top there. Just establishes a little bit of sky behind. A little bit of cloud running in there also. Go with that. Okay, I'm going to grab a smaller brush again because I want to go in and put some of those branches in of the tree that's directly in front of me. So I'll move my umbrella around here so I get shade on my palette. This one branch is quite interesting that goes over. I want to keep this pretty loose. I don't like things to get too exacting when I'm out here. I'm not doing this to sell it. I'm doing this for me, so I'm more interested in getting a feel of the place than I am an exact replica. This is a very interesting looking little patch of root system here. It's quite backlit, this tree. We'll come in and put some highlights on that after. Put in this branch. Some of these are quite fine, so I don't want to make them too heavy with the brush line, and again, not being a slave to it, just working with a for composition. It'll work with the painting. These are old cottonwoods. And they're very interesting trees to paint. There's definitely a lot of finer branches on there that I'll come back in a little bit later and try to do with a bit of a finer brush there. But right now, I'm gonna get in that bank. I still see some darker shadows in this area here. I'll get in. Should probably get some darks in these two. This is just burnt sienna and ultramarine blue that I'm using to get those darks in there. And there's a shadow from this tree. A little more blue to that. Coming over, and then one from the lower tree. It's actually quite dark in here behind it. Bit of a shadow running along the edge of those brighter grasses there. So mixing up sort of a dark mauve here with the burnt sienna and the cobalt, just a touch of white. Get some depth in this shoreline a little bit. And you can come in and add a sense of pebbles in there later, but let's just get a few interesting brush marks in there that are random, just to give it that busy feel that the texture of the rocks have. Didn't bring my palette knife with me, I noticed today, so I'm a little peeved about that because it would have been good for the rocks, but we'll just have to use a brush and just creating some of that busyness of wood and whatnot. Maybe we'll put that one log in there. We'll see how it works later. It does catch the light kind of nicely, so it might be interesting. And that shoreline in here is quite dark. Let's pine that log. That water gets quite violet-y in the front here. A little more red in there. A little bit of deep red. There we go. I find I'm seeing a fairly heavy violet tone in that area. A little more burnt sienna in there just to bring that down a notch. And just in front of that bank, it's quite dark there. I like that violet color, the depth of it, so I just want to get a little of that up in that bank behind. Kind of brings the painting together a bit if you can include colors that you're using all throughout the picture. And that violet really appeals to me. I get that lightness that's in behind that area. Light sandy before I get too far on top of it. It's warmer than that. Let's add a little bit of yellow ochre to that. Using this brush very softly to create some texture on that bank. I'm kind of dipping into that purple that I made with a little bit of the yellow ochre and titanium white, just to create that texture that's over there on that far side. And in here, okay, just had to make sure that my battery was still activated there. I'm gonna go a little bit of that purpley area behind that grass because it'll help to make that yellow grass pop that's in front of it there. I'm kind of seeing kind of a yellowy or yellow ochre, burnt sienna, tad bit of cobalt blue there, just for a kind of a greeny browny color on this far bank here. I just want to pull up here to just create a little bit of texture on that edge, and there's some shrubbery along there also that we want to hint at here. that sits kind of behind these trees. I think I might leave out the brambles in behind these two trees just because I feel like it might get a little too cluttered, and I want to show the contrast of those trees behind. But I do like them back here in this area, so we'll definitely do that texturing behind. And there's some texture on this bank here. I already feel it cooling off out here. A little burnt sienna here to add some color variance in that grass. Now I want some darker. I'm going to go into a little bit smaller brush just so I can create some texture along that shoreline. I'm going to be doing some darks and some lights there to give an impression of rocks. Don't have to do every rock, but just by hinting at some, it'll lead the imagination to fill in the blanks. I'll oftentimes take these home and do a little bit of extra detail on them depending on how I feel when I see them at home. But the point of it is to keep it kind of loose out here, really, so you don't want to change the picture when you go back home. Just sometimes some details are kind of hard to get when you're out doing the plein air, especially if you're working on really fine lines of things. But more depth in that little tangle of rooty stump there in the water. So now I want to go back up. I don't like to stay in the same area for too long. I'm going to go back up to those trees, add a little bit more interest to those branches with a little bit of a finer rigger brush here. I don't want to make these perfect in any way. I just want to, if anything, make them look kind of random like nature does. So some of these are a little warmer, so I'm adding a little more burnt sienna to some of those, especially as they are hit by the sun. want to just make these look a little busy, if anything, because that's what I see when I look at them, is just this sort of busyness. There's lots of movement in those branches. Now let's get some of those darker sides on. I'm actually seeing some highlighted areas of this that are quite warm and light looking, so we'll put some of those in there. A soft white that I had mixed up earlier, I'm using just to create some of those lighter branches, or the lighter sides of some of these too. Especially the ones against the sun there. Now, I want to add some lighter texture into that. Actually, first let's get this tree trunk, this interesting little gnarly branch in there, or root system, I guess, that's sort of the bottom there. And we'll get the shady side of this one log that's sitting there, so we can highlight that also. It's kind of a gnarly bit of an old root in there too, but we'll just do some dots and dashes for that, and hopefully that'll be enough for the eye to work with. That shady side in a little bit more here. Again, I'm gonna add even more darks in there so I can come back and highlight that. Put some of those, and add a little yellow ochre and light red, just to make a nice warm color there. Maybe a little bit of my cat yellow, a little bit of white. Just want to highlight some of those grasses that are looking quite light right now in the back here. I don't want to draw every little grass, but just want to add a little lighter effect. And on this other far bank too, where the light's catching some of those little tufts, especially as they go over the top here. And I'll pull a few in there along the back edge, just so it doesn't look like a straight line coming up where those grasses are. Sun's come out again, so I'm getting more of that look that I saw when I first get here, so I'm trying to catch some of those colors while I see them. Nice warmth in that. Oops, that's a little too warm. A nice little bit of warmth, even in the shade behind these trees. Makes that trunk look nice and dark too, with that contrast from the sunny side to the back of it. A little lighter as it goes up the tree. And there's a few warm bits here as the sun comes through on that side there. Kind of see a few of the lines in the trunk there, but I don't want to over detail it, but I am gonna just sort of thicken that trunk just a bit more, and then we'll throw in some warmer kind of tones where that sun hits at the front. Using the paint fairly thick there to get that lighter highlight in. And some of those branches I'm still seeing a little bit darker in here, so I want to make the backs of them a little bit darker, and then those lights will pop off the front side. I want some warmer yellowy red tones in there. There's definitely some warmth as those branches are hit by the sun in the front. Need a little brighter white there for creating just a sense of the rocks now in that area. Don't want to make the color the same, so some will be a little bit warmer and some will be a little cooler. Gosh, I want to grab a little bit shorter brush for that. That rigger's a little too floppy to use there. I didn't, like I say, bring my palette knife brush today, so I'm kind of just using a brush but going fairly heavy with the paint to create the texture there and the shoreline. I still do want to come back and put some lighter bits on some of those, but there's a shadow under that stump there and one in here too. I do want to grab that rigger brush again and just get those branches a little more defined in that little clump behind there. Burnt sienna and ultramarine work for that pretty good. Picking up a little ultramarine blue, a little bit of cad red light. Making up that purple again, because I want to have that around this shoreline here. A little bit of burnt sienna in there to just kind of mute that down a little bit. Now I just want to add a little white to that. It's definitely got this bluey, mauvey tinge to the ice, so. Where the ice is, just using a very kind of mauvey white there, quite thick. Just, actually going to use just sort of to find that little tuft of a stump here, just a little bit. Get some darks in there. And we'll come in and put some highlights here in a few minutes on there. I'll redefine the bottom side of that log. And there's just some mucky dirt in there also. Now, back to those rocks. I want to highlight some here. See, my sun has gone in again, but I knew that some of those were warm and some of them were a little cooler, so just giving it a good variety of colors in there. A few little rocks higher up. And some texture in that sandy, rocky area there. Rusty area at the top there kind of pulls down into the sand a bit. Now, let's create some texture on that front. I do have my rigger brush for this. I'm not sure if I'm gonna go with it or I'll do a few just sort of random bits of grasses coming up into the foreground there. Oh, some yellow ochre. What's that? Kind of an old grass look now. The color is kind of gone out of it, and it's laying in clumps in some spots, and a few of them are standing up, but let's get those darks in there first, and then we can come back with some a little bit lighter color to highlight with. Really just trying to create some interesting marks with the brush. There's a little bit of almost a pinkiness to this grass as it starts to age, and just want to put that in there. I like that color. I think we're almost getting to that point where I've been working on it for an hour, and I want to get that shade in under that tree there. And I'm starting to feel cold. People have come and gone. It's probably getting a little later now, and I should probably think about wrapping this up. Like I say, if there's any little details that I want to add to it as I get it back, we can do that, but I feel like I've got the basics of what I wanted down out of this painting. I didn't end up putting the log that was laying down in the front. I felt like the scene was busy enough. I had a feeling that might happen. That's why I didn't actually put it in my block-in stage, but I like some of these little bits of shrubbery that are sitting. And on the back of there, some darks in here. I think we could probably put a few finer branches in here, but I don't want to overdo it. I'm gonna scrub in just a few really loose ones for that impression of busyness with the on the warmer side, but there's a very busy look to those branches, so I'm gonna go fairly wet actually with this, just so that it keeps them pretty fine. A little bit more of a hint of some shrubbery in there as it comes down the hill. Even a little bit of a greenish tinge to it. Is it clumps of life still, late fall. So I just had to put a coat on there. It was getting a little chilly, which tells me it's almost time to pack this up. I'll just give it a couple more little bits and pieces here. I wanted some highlights on my log down here. And there's a fairly bright little spot of sun reflecting on there. I'm kind of hoping my sun would come back, but doesn't look like it's going to now. It's got a little more overcast. I want some of those just want to go in there and just reestablish some of those little dark spots that are kind of like puddles around the edges there that have melted, because they look darker than the ice. I'm gonna switch brushes here, get something just a little bit longer. just kind of putting in a few little details here at the end. Just if I've gone quiet, it's just because I'm just sort of finishing up now. A little cold. Standing back from the picture a lot just to make sure that I've interpreted it how I wanted to see it. I do want to, before I leave here, I want to get some of these lighter grasses that are coming up at the front there. And this is just kind of a dirty, warm white that I have here, just to get some of those over that edge, because they're sort of hanging in front of the water there, and I like that effect. Keeping everything real loose. I find with areas that tend to be busy, the looser you keep it, the better it'll come across. time to wrap it up. Thank you for joining me again for this video, and I'll catch you on the next plein air.